going to, Rachel and I will be flying to the Bay Area to have a seder on Sunday with our Havurah, friends who we have known for 20-ish years, and we share all our holidays with whenever we can. Okay, so reason number two why Passover is the most celebrated Jewish holiday. Well, it's comforting and fun to kind of do the same ritual every year, especially one that involves food and storytelling. Okay, reason number three. Passover is at the heart of the Jewish narrative. It is our founding myth. Why do we honor the divine? Because the divine saved us from Egypt. What scrolls are in the tefillin that ritually observant people wrap around their arm every day? It is the story of the Exodus from Egypt as well as the Shema. And 36 times the Torah tells us to welcome the stranger because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. So even the Jewish imperative towards social justice is based on the Exodus narrative. So, reason number four brings together everything above. And if we wrap it all up, I call it a personal spiritual history. Many people who were born Jewish have memories of going to a Seder as a child with parents and grandparents and maybe extended family. And when we go to a Seder, those memories come back to us. And for people who are not Jewish or who are not born Jewish, there is an opportunity to become a part of this story and narrative. Because a Passover Seder is story time. We are taught that we were all present at the Exodus and we were witnesses to these great events. Now, reason number five is this is an old practice. It's old even by Jewish standards. For example, reading the names of the deceased and having a Yizkor service is an old practice that goes back to the Crusades about 1,000 years. So right now, I'm going to show you some text from the Mishnah, one of our oldest rabbinic sources that was completed in about 200 CE. So we are easily approaching a practice from 2,000 years ago. So let's take a look and see if we can recognize it. And if you've never done a text study or don't even know what I'm talking about with the Mishnah, don't run away. It'll be all right. This will be a very accessible exercise we will be um, doing together. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I need to change. There we go. So this is a source sheet from Safaria. I will actually put the source. Well, actually, I don't have chat handy, so I'm not going to do that, but I'll share this source sheet with anyone who wants to. Okay, so Mishnah Pesachim. So this is basically Passover. This is chapter 10, verse 1. On the eve of Passover, after the afternoon mincha service, a person may not eat until dark, so they will have a hearty appetite for eating matzah. Even the poorest of Jews should not eat the meal on Passover until he reclines on his left side as the free and wealthy people recline as they eat. And the distributors of charity should not give a poor person less than 4 cups of wine for the festival meal of Passover. And this rule applies even if the poor person is one of the poorest members of society who receives food from the charity plate. So I actually cut and pasted some footnotes from a different edition. So the poor dish or the charity plate, what they used to do is they would go around with a big platter from house to house and people would put food on it. And then they would take this platter to the people who were very poor and did not have food, and people could take food from it. So this was a Jewish practice from, again, this story was written down in 200 CE, so it was much older than this. So this idea of providing for the poor is a Jewish value that goes back a very long way. That's really the main reason why I wanted to show you this first mission. I thought that was so interesting, this concept of the charity plate. But we do see this idea of reclining, which is in our seder today. Okay. So then, when we get to the second cup, the son questions the father, and if the son doesn't know how to ask, the father instructs them. How different this night is from all other nights. And if we looked at the Hebrew, it would be manish tanah. On all other nights, we eat hametz and matzah. Tonight, only matzah. Vegetables, only bitter herbs. Then we get to number three. On all other nights, we eat meat roasted, boiled, or cooked. Tonight, only roasted. And on all other nights, we dip once. Tonight, twice. So, this one that may not be familiar to you is this one about the roasted meat. But the other three are word for word exactly what is in our Haggadah today. So this tradition of the four questions goes, all the way back 2,000 years. There's also this then we get to the telling of the story. He begins with shame and concludes with praise, expounds from a wandering Aramean was my father. That's a reference to Jacob, who was wandering, who was being kind of persecuted by Laban, and went into Egypt with all of his children and then ended up in slavery. So, again, this is the telling of the Passover story, very much how we do so today. So, here's a commentary on this chapter we just looked at, and he points out that the four questions developed over time, and later copyists revised the original questions with those familiar to them. The questions that we were just looking at, those were from the Babylonian Talmud. There was a different scholarly community in Jerusalem, and their four questions were slightly different. And we've seen, we often use the traditional ones, but I suspect many of us have seen alternative or more modern versions of the four questions. So again, this idea that they could change or evolve over time is not new. Okay, we'll skip these sections from Deuteronomy. And I think I'm just going to share, two more pieces. So from chapter 5, Rabbi Gamliel said, you need to mention three things: the Pesach, the matzah, and the bitter herbs. Why? Because the omnipresent passed over the houses of our fathers in Egypt. Sounds pretty familiar to me. And that's the Paschal lamb, right? We're talking about the lamb's blood story. The matzah, because our fathers were redeemed from Egypt. Here we don't see this. There wasn't time to for the bread to be leavened. It's more kind of a symbol of redemption. And the bitter herb, because of our embittered slavery. Again, that's the same. And then here's a phrase: in every generation, a person is obliged to regard as if they had personally gone forth. Again, this is 2,000 years ago. This idea, this central idea of the Seder was already part of the practice. Here, tell your child it is because of what the divine did for me when I came forth out of Egypt. Again, really familiar. Now, here's one kind of interesting note that I'm going to end on, and then we'll stop the recording. We can have some discussion for those who are here in person. So, therefore, we need to thank and praise and do all these things, say all these praises of the divine, and before him, say hallelujah. So, hallelujah is a hint that we're starting to talk about Psalms. And there's a part which, in many of the seders I've gone to, we don't do the Psalms, which is called Halal. They're festival psalms that are done on occasions like this and more traditionally observant communities. And they're actually some really nice psalms. But then if we go into Chapter 6, how far does one recite the Hallel before the meal? So um, the two Psalms are 113 and 114. Well, the house of Shammai would say until 113 verse 9. But the house of Hillel said until Psalm 114, verse 8. Okay, so what is, Hillel and Shammai, they debate all kinds of things throughout the Mishnah. If you've done any text study, you may have heard of them. The college organization Hillel is named after this Hillel. But in essence, what's going on is they're saying, how long do we need to keep doing the seder before we get to eat? It's a conversation that I just had with the committee a couple nights ago. How do we want to balance doing stuff from the rituals with getting to the meal? So 2,000 years ago, two of our wisest, most famous ancestors were having that same debate. Shabbat Shalom for all of you who've been watching the video. Now I invite you to come by the B'nai Torah website, sign up for our email list. You can come to our virtual Shabbat services and join the conversation yourself.